In the high-stakes world of the Valenti crime syndicate, intelligence is currency, but silence is survival. When Dawson Valenti, the most feared man on the East Coast, stood to lose $200 million in a single botched negotiation, the room fell deadly quiet. 20 of the world's most expensive Ivy League executives sat frozen, their degrees and strategies useless against a hidden betrayal they couldn't see. No one dared to breathe, let alone speak. No one except the invisible girl pouring the vintage Cabernet in the corner. She saw what 20 experts missed, and with just one sentence, she didn't just save a fortune, she started a war. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse boardroom atop the Valenti Tower. The glass was bulletproof, thick enough to stop a sniper's round, but it did nothing to muffle the thunder rolling over the Manhattan skyline. Inside, the atmosphere was heavier than the storm. Dawson Valenti stood at the head of the obsidian conference table. He was a man carved from marble and violence, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than most people earned in a decade. He didn't shout. He didn't slam his fists. He simply stared at the projected screen displaying a complex shipping route through the Mediterranean, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Explain it to me again," Dawson said. His voice was a low rumble, terrifyingly calm. "We are 48 hours away from the acquisition of the Greek port. The papers are drafted, the funds are in escrow, and yet the manifest numbers don't add up." The boardroom was filled with 20 men. These were not street thugs. These were the clean face of the Valenti organization. Executives, lawyers, forensic accountants, men with degrees from Harvard, Yale, and Oxford. They wore Patek Philippe watches and smelled of fear. Adrian Cross, the senior vice president of operations, cleared his throat. He was a sharp-featured man who usually exuded arrogance, but today he looked like a man walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. "Mr. Valenti," Adrian started adjusting his silk tie. "We have run the audit 3 times. The discrepancy in the cargo weight is negligible. It's likely a clerical error on the seller's side. The Andoulos family is eager to sell. If we pause now to investigate a 0.05% variance, we risk insulting them and losing the deal entirely. The $200 million is an investment in infrastructure. We have to close." "A clerical error," Dawson repeated, turning his gaze to the man. "You're telling me that Nikos Andoulos, a man who counts his own rice grains, made a clerical error on a shipping manifest involving hazardous materials?" "We've checked the ledger, sir," another executive chimed in, desperate to support Adrian. "The legal team has vetted the contracts. The property rights are clear. The environmental impact surveys are clean. There is no logical reason to delay. If we don't sign by Friday at noon, the Russians will swoop in." Dawson rubbed his temples. His instincts were screaming at him. He hadn't built an empire by ignoring his gut, but he also hadn't built it by ignoring data. Every piece of paper said the deal was gold. The port would give them a direct line for their specialized imports into Europe. It was the key to legitimizing the family business for the next generation. 20 of you, Dawson said, looking around the room. "I pay you a combined salary of $50 million a year. And your collective advice is, trust the Greeks and sign the check." "It's the only move, Dawson," Victor, his consigliere, said from the side. Victor was older, usually the voice of reason. Even he was convinced. "We've looked for the trap. There isn't one." Dawson turned away, walking toward the wet bar in the corner of the room. He needed a moment to think, to separate the noise from the signal. Standing in the shadows of the bar was Layla. She was 23, wearing the standard black service uniform that was 2 sizes too big, designed to make her shapeless and invisible. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were fixed on the wine decanter she was polishing. She wasn't supposed to be listening. Staff were furniture. They were ghosts. But Layla had heard every word. She watched Dawson approach. He looked exhausted, the weight of the crown pressing down on him. He gestured vaguely at the open bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2009. "Pour," he commanded, not even looking at her. Layla poured the wine. Her hand was steady. As the ruby liquid swirled into the crystal glass, she thought about the documents she had seen flashed on the projector screen earlier. She had a photographic memory, a gift or a curse, depending on who you asked. She remembered the manifest list. She remembered the specific chemical codes listed in the negligible variants Adrian had dismissed. She placed the glass on the coaster. Dawson reached for it. He paused. He sensed her hesitation. It wasn't physical. She hadn't moved. It was a shift in the air. He turned his head, actually looking at her for the first time. He saw hazel eyes that were burning with intelligence, hiding behind a mask of servitude. "Is there a problem?" Dawson asked. Layla froze. The first rule of service in the Valenti household: never speak unless spoken to. The second rule: never offer an opinion. "No, sir," she whispered, lowering her eyes. Dawson took a sip of the wine, but his eyes didn't leave her face. He was a predator. He could smell secrets. "You're tense. My executives are sweating because they're incompetent. Why are you sweating?" "I'm not, sir." "Liar," Dawson said softly. He set the glass down. "You were looking at the screen before, when Adrian brought up the cargo weight." "I was just checking the bottle levels, sir. Don't lie to me again." Dawson's voice dropped an octave, dangerous and sharp. "I have 20 men in suits telling me to spend $200 million. You look like you want to scream." "Why?" Layla gripped the polishing cloth. She needed this job. Her father's medical bills were piling up at St. Jude's Hospital. If she got fired, they were on the street. But if Dawson signed that deal, he wasn't just losing money. He was walking into a federal trap. She took a breath. "The variance isn't a clerical error," Layla said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence of the room like a razor. The conversation at the main table stopped. 20 heads turned. Adrian Cross scoffed a noise of pure derision. "Excuse me." Adrian stood up, his face flushing red. "Dawson, tell the help to leave the room. She's interrupting a strategy meeting." Dawson held up a hand, silencing Adrian instantly. He turned his body fully toward Layla. "Go on." Layla's heart hammered against her ribs. The manifest lists the cargo as industrial fertilizer, ammonium nitrate. The variance is small in weight, 0.05%. But on the chemical breakdown sheet you showed, she pointed a trembling finger toward the black screen. The molecular density code listed for that variance doesn't match fertilizer. It matches cesium-137. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Adrian laughed nervously. "She's talking nonsense. She's a waitress, for God's sake. She probably thinks cesium is a salad dressing." "It's a radioactive isotope," Layla said, her voice gaining strength. "It's a byproduct of nuclear reactor waste. It's incredibly heavy for its size. That's why the weight variance is small, but the volume gap is missing. They aren't selling you a port, Mr. Valenti. They are using the sale to transfer custody of illegal nuclear waste dumping. The moment you sign the deed, the EPA and the FBI will raid the site. The cleanup costs alone will bankrupt the subsidiary, and you'll be indicted for international environmental terrorism. The room was so quiet you could hear the rain hitting the glass. Dawson stared at her. He looked at Adrian. "Pull up the chemical breakdown. Now!" "Sir, this is ridiculous." "Do it!" Dawson roared. Adrian scrambled his fingers, fumbling over the laptop. The code appeared on the screen, Cs 137. Dawson looked at Victor. Victor was already on his phone calling a specialist. He listened for 10 seconds, his face draining of all color. He hung up and looked at Dawson. "She's right," Victor whispered, looking at Layla as if she were an alien. "The code is for radioactive waste. If we sign, we go to prison for life. The Andoulas family is setting us up." Dawson turned back to the girl. The executives looked like they wanted to vanish into the carpet. The experts, the Ivy Leaguers. They had missed it. "What is your name?" Dawson asked. "Layla, sir. Layla Brooks." "Layla Brooks." Dawson tested the name. "You just saved me $200 million and a life sentence." He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of rain and expensive tobacco. "How does a girl pouring wine know the molecular density code of cesium 137? Layla swallowed hard. I was a double major in chemistry and logistics at MIT, sir. Before I had to drop out." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Why did you drop out?" "Tuition and family matters." Dawson stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the table of 20 men. "Get out," he said calmly. "Dawson, surely." Adrian started. "Get out." The executives fled. Papers were gathered in haste. Chairs scraped. Within 30 seconds the room was empty, save for Victor Dawson and Layla. Dawson walked over to the table, picked up the contract, and ripped it in half. He dropped the pieces on the floor. Then he looked at Layla. "You're not pouring wine anymore, Layla." The promotion was immediate, and it was controversial. By the next morning, the rumor mill within the Valenti organization was spinning so fast it threatened to catch fire. They called her the Wine Girl. Layla was moved from the staff quarters in the basement to a sleek glass-walled office on the 40th floor, right next to the executive wing. Her uniform was replaced. A stylist had been sent to her apartment at 6:00 a.m. with a rack of clothes, sharp blazers, tailored trousers, heels that clicked with authority. But clothes couldn't protect her from the wolves. Her first official meeting was at 9:00 a.m. It was a briefing on the family's casino operations in Atlantic City. Dawson sat at the head of the table. Layla sat to his right in the chair, usually reserved for the CFO. The 20 executives were back, though they looked considerably less smug than the day before. However, the resentment in the air was palpable. Adrian Cross stared at Layla, with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical weight. "We are looking at a 14% drop in slot revenue at the Golden Trident," Adrian said, projecting a graph. He studiously avoided looking at Layla. "Our analytics team suggests it's a seasonal lull. We recommend reducing floor staff to cut overheads until the summer rush." Dawson leaned back. "Layla." The room stiffened. Adrian's jaw clenched. Layla looked at the spreadsheet on her tablet. She hadn't slept. She had spent the entire night reading the Golden Trident's operational files. She was terrified, but she remembered the look in her father's eyes when she told him she might be able to afford his surgery soon. She couldn't fail. "It's not a seasonal lull," Layla said. Her voice was steadier today. "And firing staff will only make it worse." "And here we go," Adrian muttered, loud enough for the table to hear. "Please enlighten us with your hospitality wisdom." Did you learn about casino algorithms while opening corks? Layla turned to him. No, Adrian. I learned about them by looking at the foot traffic heat maps you ignored on page 42. She tapped her tablet, and the main screen changed. The drop in revenue correlates exactly with the installation of the new high-tech security gates at the north entrance. They create a bottleneck. The average wait time to enter the casino has gone from 30 seconds to 4 minutes. High rollers hate waiting. They are diverting to the Riviera down the street. You don't need to fire staff. You need to rip out those gates. Dawson looked at the heat map. It was obvious. A red blotch of congestion right at the entrance. Who authorized the new gates? Dawson asked. Adrian shifted in his seat. My brother-in-law's security firm installed them. It was an upgrade. It's costing me $300,000 a week, Dawson said, cold. Rip them out, today. He looked at Layla. A flicker of something passed behind his eyes. Respect, amusement. Good catch. The meeting continued, and it became a bloodbath. Every time an executive tried to obscure a failure with jargon, Layla cut through it. She found ghost employees on the payroll in construction. She found a vendor overcharging for linens by 200%. She was relentless. She wasn't doing it to be cruel. She was doing it because she saw the patterns they were too lazy or corrupt to care about. By the time the meeting ended, Layla was exhausted. She gathered her files and headed for the door. Ms. Brooks, a voice called out. She turned. It was Adrian Cross. He was standing in the corridor out of sight of the cameras. The charm was gone. He looked like a cornered rat. You think you're smart, don't you? He hissed, stepping close to her. I'm just doing my job, Adrian. You're a tourist, he spat. You're a flavor of the month. Dawson keeps pets, Layla. He gets bored. And when he gets bored, he throws them away. You embarrassed me in there. You cost my family a contract. I saved the company money, Layla said, holding her ground. You made enemies, Adrian corrected. Do you know what happens to people who don't fit in here? They have accidents. You should go back to pouring wine. It's safer. He brushed past her, checking her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Layla watched him go, her heart racing. She knew he was right about one thing. She was painting a target on her back. That evening, Dawson summoned her to his private office. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the room. Drink, he offered, holding up a glass of bourbon. I don't drink on the job, sir. You're not on the job. The workday ended an hour ago. She took the glass. Thank you. Dawson sat on the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. The massive skyline of New York sprawled behind him. You made a lot of people look stupid today. I told the truth. The truth is a dangerous thing in my line of work, Dawson said. Adrian Cross has been with the family for 10 years. His father worked for my father. Is that why you let him steal from you? Layla asked boldly. Dawson's eyebrows shot up. Steal tar. The security gates, the vendor contracts. He's taking kickbacks. It's buried in the subledgers, but it's there. He's skimming off the top. Dawson stared at her. The silence stretched. Then he let out a short, dark laugh. I know, Dawson said. Layla blinked. You know then why? Because until today he was useful. His theft was the cost of doing business. But now... Dawson stood up and walked toward her. He moved with the grace of a panther. He stopped inches from her. Now I have someone who can do his job better. And she doesn't steal. He reached out his fingers, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was electric. Layla stopped breathing. "But you need to be careful, Layla," he murmured. "Men like Adrian don't go quietly. They will try to destroy you. They will try to frame you. They will look for your weak spot." "I don't have a weak spot," she lied. Dawson smiled a sad, knowing smile. "Everyone has a weak spot. Who is the patient at St. Jude's?" "Your father." Layla froze. "How did you—" "I'm Dawson Valenti. I know everything. I paid his bill this morning. In full. He's being moved to a private suite with the best specialists in the state." Tears pricked Layla's eyes. "Why?" "Because you saved me $200 million. Consider it a bonus." His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "And because I don't want you distracted, we have a gala in Monaco next week, the Grand Prix weekend. We're meeting the syndicate heads from Europe. You're coming with me." "As your assistant?" "No," Dawson said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "As my partner." The Gulf Stream G650 sliced through the clouds above the Atlantic, a silver bullet racing toward the sunrise. Inside the cabin was quieter than a library and more luxurious than most five-star hotels. Cream leather seats, walnut trim, and the soft hum of engines were the only constants. Layla sat across from Dawson, a file folder open on her lap. She wasn't reading it, though. She was watching him sleep. For the last 6 hours, the terrifying King of the East Coast had been out cold, his head resting against the window. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened. He didn't look like a man who ordered hits or toppled governments. He looked like a man who hadn't rested in a decade. "Staring is rude, Layla," Dawson murmured, his eyes still closed. Layla jumped, nearly dropping the file. I was thinking." Dawson opened one eye, a smirk playing on his lips. He sat up, straightening his vest. "Thinking about what? How much trouble we're walking into." "Thinking about why you brought me," Layla admitted. "Victor hates me. Adrian wants me dead, and the European syndicate leaders won't respect a woman at the table. I'm a liability." Dawson poured himself a sparkling water. "You're thinking like an employee. Start thinking like a predator. Why would I bring a liability into a pit of vipers?" "Distraction, weapon," Dawson corrected. "The Europeans are old money, aristocrats. They view the American mob as thugs in expensive suits. They expect me to bring muscle. They expect me to bring lawyers who shout. They won't expect you. And what am I? You are the one who reads the fine print while they're looking at your legs." Dawson's gaze was intense. "We are meeting with the Corsican Brotherhood. They control the shipping lanes in the Western Mediterranean. We need their ports to replace the Greek deal you torpedoed. But the Corsicans are thieves. They will try to cheat us on the tariffs. I need you to memorize their tax codes, their shipping volumes, and their weak spots. By tonight." Layla looked at the thick binder. "By tonight, welcome to the family." Monaco was a glittering jewel of excess. The Valenti motorcade, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, wove through the winding streets of Monte Carlo, pulling up to the Hôtel de Paris. The paparazzi were already there, flashing bulbs popping like strobe lights. Dawson exited the car first, buttoning his jacket. He turned and offered a hand to Layla. She took it. As she stepped out, the flashes intensified. She was wearing sunglasses and a nondescript travel outfit, but the world was already asking, "Who is the girl with Valenti?" They took the private elevator to the penthouse suite. It was massive, with a balcony overlooking the harbor, where yachts the size of city blocks bobbed in the azure water. Your room is through there. Dawson pointed to double doors on the left. Get changed. The tailor sent the dress an hour ago. We leave for the casino in 40 minutes. Layla walked into her room and stopped dead. On the bed lay a dress that looked like it had been woven from moonlight and danger. It was a deep midnight blue silk floor length with a slit that ran up the thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. Next to it was a velvet box containing a diamond necklace that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. She touched the silk. It was beautiful. It was armor. 40 minutes later, she walked out into the main salon. Dawson was waiting, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He turned to hand her a glass and he stopped. The glass tilted in his hand, a drop of champagne spilling onto the carpet. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his eyes traveling from the diamonds at her throat to the curve of her waist. The silence stretched thick and electric. "Too much?" Layla asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dawson cleared his throat, setting the glass down. He walked over to her, standing behind her. He reached out and adjusted the clasp of the necklace, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck. His touch burned. "No," he whispered, his breath against her ear. "It's perfect. They won't see you coming." He offered her his arm. "Ready to go to war?" "Ready," she lied. The Casino de Monte Carlo was a cathedral of greed. Under the gilded ceilings, fortunes changed hands with the turn of a card. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. When Dawson and Layla entered the room, seemed to tilt toward them. Whispers followed in their wake. Dawson navigated the crowd with practiced ease, nodding to associates, ignoring rivals. They headed for the salon privé, the high-stakes room. Inside, a private baccarat table was waiting. Seated at the table was a man who looked like a starved hawk. He had silver hair, a hooked nose, and eyes that were entirely black. This was Jean-Paul, the head of the Corsican Brotherhood. Behind him stood 2 massive bodyguards, and a man Layla recognized from the personnel files, Adrian Cross. Layla's blood ran cold. Adrian was supposed to be in New York, managing the fallout of the Greek deal. "Dawson," Jean-Paul said, his voice like dry leaves. He didn't stand up. "You bring a mistress to a business meeting. Americans are so sentimental." Dawson sat down, pulling out a chair for Layla. "She's not a mistress, Jean-Paul. She's my auditor, and Adrian isn't supposed to be here." Dawson's eyes flicked to Adrian. "Care to explain why you're in Monaco, Adrian?" Adrian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked slick, sweaty, and confident. "Jean-Paul invited me, boss. We go back a long way. I thought I could help smooth over the negotiations, seeing as your new auditor has so little experience in international diplomacy." "I see," Dawson said. His voice was calm, but Layla saw his hand clench into a fist under the table. This was a power play. Adrian was openly aligning himself with the Corsicans. "Let's play," Jean-Paul said, gesturing to the dealer. "We play, we talk. The stakes, the shipping tariffs. If I win, you pay 20%. If you win, you pay 10. And if we find discrepancies in your volume reports," Layla spoke up. Jean-Paul looked at her as if a chair had just spoken. "Excuse me, the volume reports," Layla said, placing a small clutch on the table. "I reviewed your proposed tariff schedule on the plane. You're charging a surcharge for high-risk cargo security in the Strait of Gibraltar. But according to maritime law, the Corsican Brotherhood doesn't hold jurisdiction there anymore. The Spanish Navy does. So you're charging us for protection you don't provide." The table went deadly silent. Jean-Paul's black eyes narrowed. He looked at Adrian. "You said she was a waitress." "She is," Adrian said quickly. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. Ignore her." "I'm looking at the satellite logs right now," Layla said, bluffing. She wasn't looking at anything. She had memorized the logs 3 hours ago. "Your patrol boats haven't left the harbor in 3 weeks. You're billing us for ghost ships." Dawson leaned back, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "Ghost ships, Jean-Paul." "That's rude." Jean-Paul threw his cards down. "This is an insult. Adrian, deal with this." "With pleasure," Adrian said. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, Layla thought he was reaching for a gun. Dawson's hand moved instantly to his waistband, but Adrian didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the center of the green felt table. "I didn't want to do this in public, Dawson," Adrian said, feigning sadness. "But you leave me no choice. I couldn't let you sign a deal with this woman whispering in your ear, not when she's a federal informant." The words hung in the air like smoke. Federal informant. In the Mafia, that was a death sentence. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a verdict. Dawson didn't look at the paper. He looked at Layla. His face was a mask of stone, unreadable. "Explain." "It's a transfer receipt," Adrian said, pointing a manicured finger at the paper. "From the FBI field office in New York. $5,000 deposited into an account under the name of Layla Brooks 2 days before she discovered the radioactive waste. It was a setup, Dawson. The feds planted the info with her to get her close to you. She's wearing a wire right now." Layla felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie. I've never spoken to the FBI in my life." "Check her bag," Adrian commanded. Jean-Paul nodded to his bodyguard. The massive man stepped forward and grabbed Layla's clutch. He dumped the contents onto the table. Lipstick, phone, a compact mirror, and a small black device, no larger than a coin. A listening device. "Classic tech," Adrian sneered. "Transmits directly to a van within a 2-mile radius. She's been broadcasting this entire meeting." Dawson stared at the bug. He picked it up, rolling it between his fingers. The silence in the private room was deafening. The other patrons of the casino were miles away. Here in the soundproof VIP room, there was only the sound of careers ending and guns being drawn. "Dawson," Layla said, her voice shaking. "I didn't put that there." "He did. When he walked in, he brushed past my chair. Please, you have to believe me." Dawson looked at her. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth that had been there in the hotel room. "The evidence is right here, Layla." "It's planted," she cried. "Why would I save you $200 million just to sell you out for $5,000? "To gain trust," Adrian interjected smoothly. "To get to the inner circle, to get to Monaco, and look where you are." Adrian turned to Dawson. "She's a rat, boss. You know the rules. If you don't handle it, the Corsicans will. They can't do business with a compromised partner." Jean-Paul nodded slowly. "He is right, Valenti. She disappears tonight or the deal is off. And if the deal is off, we go to war." Dawson stood up. He loomed over the table. He looked at Adrian, then at Jean-Paul, and finally at Layla. He reached into his jacket. Layla flinched. Dawson pulled out a lighter. He held the flame to the FBI transfer receipt. The paper curled and blackened, turning to ash on the green felt. "What are you doing, Etoile?" Adrian demanded, his voice cracking. "That receipt is a forgery," Dawson said calmly. "And a bad one. The routing number listed for the FBI field office, it's wrong. It's missing a digit, and the date stamp is in the wrong format." Dawson turned his gaze to Adrian. You were always lazy with the details, Adrian. That's why you hired a waitress to do your math. Adrian's face went pale. The bug. What about the bug? This. Dawson held up the black device. He dropped it on the floor and crushed it under his heel. Crunch. Standard frequency jammer. It blocks signals, it doesn't transmit them. You planted a jammer on her to kill our comms so you could ambush us. Dawson walked around the table. The Corsican bodyguards tensed, but Jean-Paul waved them down. He was watching with interest. You tried to frame her, Dawson said, stopping inches from Adrian. You tried to make me kill the only person in this room who is actually loyal to me, and you insulted my intelligence in front of my partners. Dawson, listen. Adrian stammered, backing away until he hit the wall. She's brainwashing you. I did this for the family. No, Layla said. She stood up. Her legs were trembling, but her voice was strong. She picked up her tablet. You did it for the Russians. She swiped the screen and projected a document onto the wall monitor. While you were busy planting devices in my bag, I was tracking the Bluetooth handshake of your phone, Layla said. It pinged a secure server in Moscow 3 times in the last 10 minutes. You aren't working with the Corsicans, Adrian. You're selling the root data to the Sokolov Bratva. You wanted the deal to fail so the Russians could sweep in and take the port. Jean-Paul stood up slowly. His expression had changed from boredom to fury. The Corsicans hated the Russians. They had been at war for turf for 20 years. Is this true? Jean-Paul hissed at Adrian. No. No, it's... Dawson didn't let him finish. He struck Adrian a fast, brutal backhand that sent the executive sprawling across the buffet table. Shrimp and crystal scattered everywhere. Adrian groaned, clutching his bleeding nose. Dawson, please. Dawson adjusted his cuffs. He looked at Jean-Paul. My apologies for the mess. It seems my former vice president has resigned. You can do with him what you wish. Jean-Paul nodded to his bodyguards. They moved toward Adrian. The look on their faces promised a very long, very painful night. As for the deal, Dawson said, turning back to Layla. He held out his hand. My associate has the correct numbers. 10% tariff, no ghost ship fees, and we want exclusivity. Jean-Paul looked at Adrian being dragged out the side door, kicking and screaming. Then he looked at Layla, the woman in the blue dress who had outsmarted a veteran executive and a crime lord in under 5 minutes. Jean-Paul smiled a genuine, crooked smile. She is formidable, Valenti. 10%. We have a deal. Later that night, back in the penthouse suite, the adrenaline finally crashed. Layla sat on the edge of the balcony, looking out at the lights of the yachts, reflecting on the water. She was shaking. It was one thing to look at spreadsheets. It was another to watch a man being dragged away to his likely death. The glass door slid open. Dawson stepped out. He had taken off his jacket and tie, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He held 2 glasses of wine. Chateau Margaux. He handed her one. You did good, he said softly. He's going to die, isn't he? Layla asked, staring at the wine. Adrian. He made his choice. He betrayed the family. Dawson took a sip. In this life, loyalty is the only currency that matters. You proved yours tonight. You stood your ground when a gun was pointed at your head. I was terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Dawson moved closer. The night air was warm, but his presence was hotter. You saved the deal. Again. You're becoming an expensive habit, Layla. Does this mean I get a raise? She joked weakly. Dawson didn't laugh. He set his glass down on the railing and turned her to face him. His hands settled on her waist, pulling her flush against him. "It means," Dawson said, his voice rough, "that you are no longer just an employee. You are mine, and I protect what is mine." He leaned down. Layla's breath hitched. She looked up at him, at the dangerous, broken, beautiful man who held her life in his hands. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was possessive, demanding, and consuming. It tasted of wine and violence. Layla wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, surrendering to the darkness he offered. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She felt like the center of the universe. But as they pulled apart, breathless Dawson's phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. With a groan of frustration, he picked it up. He looked at the screen and his face hardened instantly. The lover vanished. The Don returned. "What is it?" Layla asked, sensing the shift. "It's Victor," Dawson said. "Back in New York." He put the phone on speaker. "Dom, we have a problem." Victor's voice crackled, sounding panicked. "The FBI just raided the warehouse in Jersey. They knew exactly where the shipment was. And Dom, they have a warrant for you." "Based on what?" Dawson demanded. "Based on the testimony of a confidential informant," Victor said. "They say they have a witness who can tie you to the murders of the 3 union leaders last year." "Who is the witness?" There was a pause on the line. "Dom, the warrant says the witness is Layla Brooks' father." Dawson froze. He slowly lowered the phone, his eyes turning to Layla. The warmth was gone. In its place was a look of betrayal so profound it chilled her to the bone. "My father," Layla whispered. "That's impossible. He's in a coma. He's in the hospital you paid for." "Is he?" Dawson asked. His voice was a deadly whisper. "Or was that the plan all along? I pay for his recovery. He wakes up and he sells me to the feds to save his daughter." "No, Dawson, I swear. Get dressed," Dawson said, stepping away from her as if she were contagious. "We're leaving. Now." "Where are we going?" "We aren't going anywhere," Dawson said. "I am going underground. You are going to the cellar. Until I find out if you played me. Layla, you don't see the sun." The flight back to New York was a funeral procession. Dawson sat in silence, staring into the dark, while Layla sat at the back, flanked by guards who looked at her with the cold indifference of executioners. Upon landing, she was driven to the Valenti estate in the Hamptons, a fortress of Gothic stone. She wasn't taken to a guest room, but marched down to a high-tech holding cell in the basement. The walls were reinforced glass. The door heavy steel. Dawson descended the stairs shortly after. He dragged a chair to the glass wall, a pistol resting casually on his knee. He looked like a wraith. "You have a comfortable bed," he said, his voice amplified by a speaker. "More than you deserve." "I don't want a bed, I want the truth," Layla pleaded, pressing her hand against the glass. "Dawson, think. Why would the FBI put my father's name on the warrant?" Dawson's jaw tightened. "Because they made a mistake, like you made a mistake playing me." "No," Layla shouted. "The FBI protects its assets. If my father was an informant, his name would be redacted. Source A. Witness 1. Writing Thomas Brooks on a document. Your lawyers can see signs his death warrant. They burned him." Dawson didn't blink, but his finger tapped rhythmically against the trigger guard. He was listening. "Why would they burn their own witness?" Dawson asked. "They wouldn't," Layla insisted, "unless the warrant is fake. Unless someone wants you to go to that hospital to silence him. It's not an arrest warrant, Dawson. It's bait. Dawson stood up, pacing the small area outside the glass. My source at the precinct saw the paperwork. It's official. Then it's a trap, Layla cried. Don't go yourself. Send a drone. Send a scout. If I'm right, the room is rigged. Dawson stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. The war inside him was visible, the betrayal fighting against the logic she kept presenting. She had been right about everything else. Could she be right about this? You better pray you're right, Dawson said. He turned and walked up the stairs. The lights in the cell flickered off, leaving her in total darkness. 6 hours later, the heavy steel door opened. Layla was huddled in the corner, shivering in the artificially cooled air. She looked up as Dawson descended the stairs. He didn't look like the composed kingpin anymore. He looked like a man who had walked through fire. His clothes were singed, and a smear of soot darkened his jawline. Victor followed close behind his face grave, clutching a tablet. Dawson unlocked the glass wall. Get up! Layla scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. What happened? You were right, Dawson said grimly. He tossed a charred piece of twisted metal onto the floor of her cell. It was the remains of a detonator. I sent a scout team to the room at St. Jude's. The moment they breached the door, the room blew. C4 wired to the hinges. Layla's hands flew to her mouth, a scream dying in her throat. My father! The room was empty. Dawson cut in his voice hard. No patient, no equipment. It was a dummy room. Your father was never there. The relief was so sudden it nearly buckled her knees, but panic followed instantly. Then where is he? That Victor said, stepping forward, is what we need you to find out. Victor handed her the tablet. We've accessed the hospital's internal transfer logs, but the files are encrypted. The administrator claims ignorance. If you are as good as you claim, find him. Dawson grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the cell. Come with us. They moved quickly to the mansion's command center, the nerve center of the Valenti Empire. It was a windowless fortress of servers and satellite feeds. Dawson shoved a chair in front of the main terminal. Find who moved him, Dawson commanded, pacing behind her, and find where he is. Layla wiped her eyes and cracked her knuckles. She needed to focus. The fear for her father was a frantic noise in her head, but she forced it into silence. She typed rapidly, her fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. Within seconds, she bypassed the hospital's primitive firewall. Here, she said, pointing to the screen. Thomas Brooks, discharged 48 hours ago. Reason transfer to specialized care facility. Destination field is blank. Who authorized it? Dawson asked, leaning over her shoulder. The authorization code is alphanumeric, Layla muttered, running a trace script. Lines of code cascaded down the monitors. I can trace the user ID who entered it. It originated from an external IP address. She narrowed her eyes. The signal bounced from a proxy server in Switzerland to the Cayman Islands, and then it stopped. Layla froze. The cursor blinked at her, mocking and terrifying. What is it? Dawson asked, sensing her hesitation. Did you lose the trail? No, Layla whispered. The blood drained from her face. The signal didn't come from the FBI, and it didn't come from a hospital administrator. Where did it come from? Layla turned her chair slowly. She looked past Dawson, her eyes locking onto the man standing by the reinforced door. It came from a device currently connected to this room's secure Wi-Fi. Layla said, her voice trembling. It came from his tablet. She pointed a shaking finger at Victor. The room went deadly still. The hum of the servers seemed to vanish. Dawson turned his head slowly. He looked at his oldest friend, the man who had raised him after his father's death. the man who stood as the pillar of the family. "Victor," Dawson said softly. Victor didn't flinch. He sighed a sound of profound disappointment and tossed his tablet onto a nearby desk. The mask of the loyal advisor slipped away, replaced by a cold, predatory amusement. "She's very good, Dawson," Victor said. "I told the Russians she would be a problem. Adrian was a fool to underestimate her. I told him to put a bullet in her head in Monaco." Dawson took a step back, his hand hovering near his holster. The betrayal hit him harder than any bullet. You rigged the hospital room." "The hospital bomb was meant for you, Dom," Victor said casually. "You were supposed to rush to the bedside of your traitor and die in the blast. It would have been a tragic end to the Valente dynasty. Clean. Final. Why?" Dawson roared, the veins in his neck bulging. "You are family. I am an employee." Victor snapped his composure, cracking. "I built this empire while you played playboy in Europe. And for what? A salary the Sokolovs offered me the city Dawson. They offered me the crown. Where is her father?" Dawson demanded, his hand gripping his gun. "Oh, he's safe," Victor sneered. "He's in the trunk of my car outside. I needed leverage in case the bomb failed. Leverage to make the girl cooperate." Victor pulled a small remote from his pocket. It featured a single red button. "Don't move, Dawson. This remote connects to the ventilation system, specifically to a canister of nerve gas I installed this morning. You shoot me. My thumb slips, and everyone in this house dies in 3 minutes, including the girl." Dawson froze. "Smart boy," Victor said. "Now kick the gun over to me." Dawson hesitated, glancing at Layla. She was terrified, but her eyes were darting around the room, analyzing the panels, the wiring, the system she was still logged into. Dawson slowly unbuckled his holster and kicked it across the floor. Victor picked it up, training the barrel on Dawson's chest. "I'm sorry, Dawson, but business is business." He cocked the hammer. "Say goodbye to the wine girl." "Wait!" Layla shouted. "You can't kill him yet." Victor laughed. "And why is that?" "Because if you kill him, you'll never get the encryption key for the offshore accounts." Victor frowned. "I have the codes. Adrian gave them to me." "Adrian had the old codes." Layla lied, her voice gaining strength. "Dawson changed them on the plane. Didn't you?" Dawson stared at her. He caught the slight movement of her hand behind her back. "Yes. I changed them. $2 billion locked away. You kill me, you get nothing." Victor hesitated. Greed warred with caution in his eyes. "Give me the new code." "Layla has it," Dawson said. "She memorized it." Victor swung the gun toward Layla. "Type it in. Now." "I'll type it," Layla said, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "But you have to promise to let my father go." "Just type," Victor snarled. Layla wasn't typing a password. She was accessing the building's central automation system. She took a breath. "The code is," Layla whispered. She hit enter. Clack! Instantly, the entire mansion plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. Layla had cut the main power grid. "What the?" Victor shouted. In the pitch black, a gunshot rang out, wild and aimless. Then came the sound of movement. Fast, brutal violence. The scuffle of shoes on carpet, a sickening impact of flesh on bone, and a wet gurgle. "Layla, get down." Dawson's voice roared from the void. Layla dropped to the floor, covering her head. A moment later, the red emergency generators kicked in. The room was bathed in a bloody crimson glow. Dawson was standing over Victor. Victor lay on the floor, gasping for air, pinned by Dawson's boot. A knife drawn from a hidden sheath in Dawson's boot was buried deep in Victor's shoulder. Dawson held his own gun, reclaimed from the traitor. "You forgot one thing, Victor," Dawson said quietly, looking down at the dying man. "What?" Victor wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "I don't need light to kill a traitor in my own home." Dawson reached down and retrieved the car keys from Victor's pocket. He didn't look back as he walked over to Layla, pulling her up from the floor and checking her for injuries. "Is it over?" she whispered, trembling. "Not yet," Dawson said, looking at the security monitors where red warning lights began to flash. "Victor signaled the Russians before you cut the power. They are coming. We have 10 minutes to get your father and get out." He checked the magazine of his gun and looked at her. "And then," Dawson said, "we burn the whole thing down." Red emergency lights pulsed as Dawson dragged Layla toward the underground garage. The ground beneath them shook. The Sokolov Bratva had breached the perimeter gates. "We have 3 minutes before they surround the house," Dawson shouted over the sirens. "Do you trust me?" "I'm running through a burning building with you, aren't I?" Layla yelled back. They burst into the cavernous garage. Dawson ignored the Ferraris, sprinting straight to Victor's nondescript sedan. "Start the engine," he commanded, tossing her the keys. As Layla revved the engine, Dawson popped the trunk. He pulled out a frail, unconscious figure wrapped in a blanket. "Dad," Layla choked out. Dawson settled the older man gently into the back seat and jumped into the passenger side. "Go service exit northwest corner." Layla peeled out tires, smoking. Outside the estate was a war zone. Armored trucks had smashed through the gates and tactical teams swarmed the grounds. Bullets shattered the rear windshield as Layla swerved onto the winding service road, ducking her head. "Headlights off," Dawson ordered. He leaned out the window, firing 3 precision shots into the darkness to slow their pursuers. "They're gaining." "We can't outrun them," Layla cried, struggling to keep the car on the road in the pitch black. "We don't have to," Dawson said grimly. He pulled the remote detonator from his pocket, the same one Victor had used to threaten them. "I thought that controlled the nerve gas." "Victor lied about the gas," Dawson said, a cold smile forming. "But he was right about the trap. He just forgot that I paid the architect." He looked back at the mansion now crawling with Russian hitmen. "Burn it down." He pressed the button. The earth heaved. A massive fireball erupted from the foundation of the Valenti estate, vaporizing the servers, the traitor, and the enemy army in one cleansing inferno. The shockwave rocked their car, but Layla kept driving into the safety of the night, leaving the old world in ashes behind them. 6 months later. The Amalfi coast smelled of lemon and sea salt. On a cliffside terrace, Dawson Valenti sat reading a newspaper. The heavy burden of New York finally gone from his shoulders. Layla walked out, placing a tray of coffee on the table. She glanced toward the garden where her father was walking with a cane, laughing with the groundskeeper. "He's healing." Layla smiled. Dawson pulled her onto his lap. "And you? I miss the bagels," she teased, "but I like the quiet." "It won't be quiet for long." Dawson tapped the paper. The European Commission just opened the bid for the new Mediterranean trade route. The Corsicans are struggling with the logistics. Layla's eyes lit up instantly. The Corsicans are using outdated routing software. If we ship through Sardinia instead of Sicily, we cut transit time by 15%. We could undercut their bid by millions and still make a 40% margin. Dawson grinned, the same look of pure admiration he had given her that first night in the boardroom. "I thought I was retired. You were just waiting for a partner who could keep up," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. Dawson kissed her back, deep and possessive. When he pulled away, he produced a velvet box containing a diamond that rivaled the stars above them. "I don't need a partner, Layla," he said. "I need a queen." Layla looked at the ring, then at the man who had burned down a kingdom to save her. "Make me an offer," she challenged. 50-50, Dawson promised. "My life, my heart, my empire, everything is yours." Layla slipped the ring on her finger. "Deal." The world thought the Valenti Empire had died in the fire. They were wrong. It had just upgraded. In a world ruled by brute force and silence, Layla Brooks proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's the truth spoken at the right moment. She started as an invisible waitress, a nobody in a room full of powerful men. But when 20 Ivy League executives were blind to a betrayal that would have cost millions, she saw the pattern they missed. Her journey from the shadows to the throne wasn't just about saving money. It was about saving herself and the people she loved. Dawson Valenti may have been the boss, but Layla was the savior. In the end, they learned that loyalty isn't bought, it's forged in fire. And sometimes the person pouring the wine is the only one who knows how to run the table. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. What would you have done if you were in Layla's shoes? Stayed quiet or risked everything to speak up? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.